The morning he said it, I was already awake. That is the detail no one ever asks about, but it is the one that matters most to me. I had been awake since 4:30, the way I always am, the way I have been for 41 years, since the first baby came and my body decided it no longer had use for deep sleep. I was in the kitchen with my coffee and the window and the particular dark blue of the sky just before it decides to become morning. I had my hands wrapped around my mug. I was thinking about nothing. That is one of the quiet gifts of being 67 years old. You learn how to sit inside a moment without needing it to be anything other than what it is. My name is Eleanor Marsh. I was born in Savannah, Georgia, in a house that no longer exists, to parents who taught me two things: how to work without complaining and how to leave a room with your dignity still on. My mother pressed both of those lessons into me the same way she pressed the wrinkles out of our church clothes, firmly, without discussion, until they held. I raised two sons in the house on Carver Street. The house my late husband Gerald and I bought in 1987 for $82,000 after 7 years of saving. Gerald worked the line at the textile plant for 23 years. I worked part-time at the county records office, managed our accounts, grew our vegetable garden, cooked every meal we ate, and kept the books for the small property management company Gerald and I quietly built on the side. 14 rental units by the time Gerald passed. Nothing glamorous. A duplex here, a small house there. Purchased carefully over decades with money other people might have spent on vacations or new cars. Gerald and I did not take vacations. We took equity. When Gerald died 8 years ago, I did not fall apart. I wanted to. There were nights in that first year when the wanting to fall apart was a physical thing, a pressure in my chest like something trying to get out. But I had learned from my mother that falling apart is a luxury, and I have never been a woman who indulged in luxuries she had not earned. I kept the properties. I kept the books. I kept the house on Carver Street, where the wisteria Gerald planted along the back fence comes back every spring as though nothing has changed. And I kept myself, which is to say, I kept the version of myself I had worked my whole life to build. A woman who handled her own business, paid her own bills, cooked her own food, drove herself to her own appointments, and did not ask anyone for a single thing she could manage alone. My sons grew up watching that. I thought it taught them something. I thought it for a long time. Marcus, my older boy, lives in Atlanta with his wife Denise and their 3 daughters. He calls on Sundays mostly. He is a decent man, busy in the way that fathers of young children are busy, and I have never once heard him say anything unkind to anyone. I am proud of Marcus in a simple, uncomplicated way. Jalen is my younger son, 34 years old. My complicated pride. Jalen is the one who looks most like Gerald, the same long jaw, the same way of standing with his weight on one hip, the same eyes that seemed to be working out a problem you did not know was being considered. He was always the one I worried about more, not because he was troubled but because he felt things more than Marcus did, and feeling things more always seemed to me like it could go either direction. You could become someone extraordinary or someone who broke under the weight of your own interior. I spent a lot of years watching to see which way Jalen would go. He married Tanya 3 years ago. I will tell you what I told my friend Celeste the first time I met Tanya. She is a woman who has decided what she deserves, and has organized her entire life around the pursuit of it. I do not say that as an insult. I say it as an observation, the way you might observe that a particular flower only blooms in a particular soil. Tanya grew up in a household with money, with a father who handed things to her and a mother who showed her how to make a room feel like she ran it. She is not a bad person. I want to be careful about that. She is simply a person who has never once in her life been required to want something she could not have. She and Jalen met at a work conference. He called me about her the same way Marcus called me about Denise, with that particular tremor in a man's voice when he has decided something without yet knowing he has decided it. I asked him to bring her to Sunday dinner. She came wearing clothes that cost more than my car payment and brought a bottle of wine that she mentioned twice, had been recommended by someone she knew in Charleston. She shook my hand instead of hugging me. I noticed. I filed it. I did not say anything. When they announced they were expecting a baby, I cried at the kitchen table, and then drove to the store and bought everything on the registry before anyone else could. I was genuinely happy. I am going to be important to say that because what comes later might make it seem as though I was not. I was happy. A grandchild is a grandchild, and whatever complications arrive around the edges of a family, A new baby is still a new baby, and I have never in my life been able to stay cold in the presence of something that new and that small and that entirely dependent on the people around it to decide what kind of world it is. Tanya's pregnancy was difficult. She had morning sickness that lasted well into the second trimester, and a back that hurt, and an anxiety about everything that I recognized from my own pregnancies as completely reasonable, and from the outside looked like something else. Jalen was attentive in the way that good men are attentive to pregnant wives. Present, worried, a little helpless. I drove over twice a week with food. Soups mostly. Casseroles they could heat. I did not stay long. I set the containers on the kitchen counter, asked how Tanya was feeling, accepted whatever answer she gave me, and left. Tanya thanked me each time with the particular warmth of someone who has been taught that gratitude is a social requirement. I accepted it the same way I accept weather. It is what it is, and making a fuss about it doesn't change the temperature. The house on Carver Street has 4 bedrooms. Gerald and I raised our boys there and never once felt it was too large. After Gerald passed, Marcus suggested I sell it and find something smaller, something easier to manage. I told him the house managed fine, and so did I. The conversation did not happen a second time. The 4th bedroom, the one at the back of the house with the window that looks out over Gerald's wisteria, had been used as Gerald's study for 20 years and as a sewing room for 10 years before that. After he died, I cleared it out slowly, over the course of a year, until it was just a room with a bed and good light and the smell of wisteria in the spring. I did not know when I cleared it that I was preparing it for someone else. I did not know then what I was doing at all. I thought I was just grieving. Jalen and Tanya lived in an apartment across town. A nice apartment, 3rd floor, 2 bedrooms. They had been there since before the wedding. When the baby was confirmed, they started talking about space, the way new parents always talk about space, like they have discovered a problem no couple has ever encountered before. I heard the conversations. Tanya mentioned the apartment felt small. Jalen mentioned the stairs. They mentioned in passing that a house with a yard would be different. I did not offer anything. I had not been asked anything. The offer, when it came from Jalen. He drove over on a Thursday evening in March, 4 months before the baby was due. He sat at my kitchen table with his hands around a coffee cup the way his father used to, and we talked about the garden and the properties and the weather, and then there was a pause the way there is always a pause when someone has come over for a reason other than the stated one, and Jalen said, "Mom, we've been thinking." I said, "I know." He looked at me. "You know what we've been thinking?" "I know you've been thinking," I said. "I don't know the content yet. Keep going." He smiled. He has a good smile, my Jalen. It is the smile of a man who knows his mother is sharper than he always remembers. He said that he and Tanya were worried about the apartment, the stairs, the noise from the street. The 2nd bedroom was barely big enough for a nursery, and certainly not big enough for a child. He said they had been looking at houses, but the market was what it was and the timing was not ideal. And, "How long?" I asked. He blinked. "How long what? How long would you need?" "A year," he said. "Maybe 18 months. Just until we find something and the timing is right." I looked at him for a long moment. My son. The one who looks like Gerald. The one who feels things more than he lets on. I thought about the wisteria. I thought about the 4th bedroom with its good light. I thought about a new baby in a house that had known babies, a house that had been built around the idea that people come back to it when they need to, and I thought this is what houses are for. This is what I have been keeping it for without knowing I was keeping it for anything. "You can come," I said. They moved in April. Megaphone, if this story is already finding its way under your skin, hit that like button and subscribe to Linda's Life Diaries. And drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. She always said the ones who stay quiet longest know the most. Let's see if that's true. The first weeks were fine. More than fine, actually. There was a warmth to having the house full again that I had not let myself miss until it arrived. Jalen cooked on Saturdays. Tanya organized the pantry without asking, which I noticed, but I said nothing because the pantry had genuinely needed organizing and I was trying to be generous about the instinct even when the execution was not quite mine to oversee. Tanya was careful with me in the particular way of someone who has been coached by their husband about how to behave around his mother. Please and thank you were consistent. She asked about my day. She ate what I cooked without complaint. I could see the effort she was making, and I want to be honest. I respected the effort, even when I could see beneath it, the way she surveyed the house with an eye that was not quite a guest's eye. An assessor's eye. The eye of someone who is deciding what belongs and what does not. I noticed the day she moved the photograph. It is a photograph of Gerald and me taken in 1994. We are standing on the front porch and someone has caught us mid-laugh. I cannot remember what the joke was, only that we were genuinely laughing, and Gerald has his arm around my waist and I am leaning into him the way you lean into someone you have trusted for a decade without thinking about it, without holding yourself apart. It is my favorite photograph of us. It has lived on the mantel above the fireplace for 30 years. Tanya moved it to the bookshelf. I thought it would look nice here. She told me when I came into the living room and it was gone from its place. It gets better light on this side of the room. The photograph gets no light at all in the corner of the bookshelf. That was not the point and we both understood it was not the point. Put it back, I said. She put it back. She smiled while she did it. And the smile was the smile of someone storing information rather than feeling anything. I recognized it because I have a version of that smile myself, and it is not an expression I enjoy seeing directed back at me. I told myself it was a small thing. I told myself several things were small things over the next months, which is what you do when you have decided to be generous and generous is not yet coming naturally. The baby shower was held at my house. Tanya's mother, a woman named Patricia who carries herself like she invented good posture, arrived 2 days early and rearranged the living room furniture to accommodate the party setup. She did not ask me. She explained it to me afterward, the way you explain something to someone who has already agreed. I smiled and moved through the rearranged room like a guest in my own house and told myself that in 3 days it would be over and the furniture would go back. The furniture did not go back, not entirely. 2 chairs ended up in different positions and stayed there. The lamp that had been beside Gerald's reading chair for 12 years migrated to the corner. I moved it back the first time. The second time I found it in the corner again. I stood in the middle of my living room for a long moment, and then I went to bed. The baby came in July. A girl. They named her Rosalie, which was Tanya's grandmother's name and which I had no opinion about and would not have shared if I had. I drove to the hospital and I held Rosalie in the hallway of the maternity ward and she gripped my finger the way new babies do. That reflexive grip that has no knowledge in it yet, only instinct, only the oldest message of all, which is I am here and I am holding on. I drove home and sat in the kitchen for a long time. A new baby changes the air in a house. There is no other way to say it. The smell of her, the sounds, the particular physics of a household organized around someone who cannot yet communicate anything except need. All of it changed the house on Carver Street in ways that were not bad exactly, but were large in the way that only life-altering things are large. I adjusted. I learned the rhythms of her feeding times. I helped when I was asked and stepped back when I was not. I kept my door closed at night to give them space and I woke at 4:30 as I always do and had my coffee in my window and let the house sleep around me. It was October when Tanya began rearranging the room assignments. Rosalie had been sleeping in the second bedroom, the one that had been the nursery. But Rosalie was 3 months old by then and Tanya had decided, not consulted, decided, that Rosalie needed more space. The nursery would need to expand. They would need the room next to the nursery as a play area eventually. She said all of this to Jalen at dinner one night as though I were not present at the table, and then, apparently realizing I was present, she turned to me with that smile and said, I was thinking we could talk about the back room. The back room? Gerald's study. My sewing room. The room with the window and the wisteria and the good light. The room that had become, in the 8 years since Gerald died, the room I thought of as the room the house was resting in. The room that was not quite mine but was certainly not anyone else's. I set down my fork. What about the back room? I asked. Well. Tanya looked at Jalen. Jalen looked at his plate. It's the largest bedroom after the master. And it's at the end of the hall, which would be nice for Rosalie when she's a little older. Room to grow. We thought, said Jalen, and here he met my eyes. And I saw in his face the same look I had seen in the hospital hallway when he handed me Rosalie for the first time. That look of a man trying to be 2 things at once and finding it harder than he expected. That you might be comfortable in the front room. The one by the bathroom. It's smaller but it's closer to everything and we thought. You want me to move to the smaller room? I said. It was not a question. It was a statement placed on the table the way you place a document you want someone to look at. Tanya was already nodding. We think it would be practical. And of course it's still your house, so. It is still my house, I agreed. There was a silence. So you'll think about it? Tanya said. I'll think about it, I said. I cleared the dinner plates. I washed them. I dried them and put them back in the cabinet in the order I have always put them back. And then I went to my room, the master bedroom where Gerald and I slept for 31 years. And I closed the door quietly and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. I sat there for a long time. I thought about my mother. About how she pressed things firmly until they held. I thought about Gerald and the way he used to say, Eleanor, the only thing that ever surprised me about people is how fast they forget what they owe and how slow they are to figure out you've noticed. I thought about 14 rental units. About $82,000 in 1987, and what that number means in 2024. I thought about a property management company that has been quietly generating income for 31 years, and whose books I still keep, by myself, in a ledger in the drawer of the desk in my room. My room. I thought about the phone call I was not yet ready to make. In the morning I was in the kitchen before anyone else woke. My coffee. My window. The particular dark blue of the sky just before morning. I had my hands wrapped around my mug and I was thinking, this time not about nothing. This time I was thinking very precisely. The front room is 12 feet by 10 feet. My room is 17 by 15. The front room has one window, which faces the street and receives no morning light. My room has two windows, east and south, and wisteria outside and 31 years of everything that matters most. A woman has to decide what she is willing to become before anyone else decides for her. I was deciding. The next morning Tanya mentioned it again, more casually, the way you mention something a second time when you are hoping repetition will function as permission. I was thinking we could look at the front room together this week, maybe figure out furniture placement. I haven't made a decision, I said. Of course. She smiled. No rush. But there was rush. That was the thing I understood without anyone telling me. The baby was 3 months old. The nursery was already outgrown in their minds. The blueprint for the rearranged house existed, fully formed in Tanya's head, and I was already placed in it, smaller further from the center, in a room that faced the street and had none of the morning light. I was already placed there. The only question was how long it would take me to agree to walk there myself. I thought about my mother again. About pressing things firmly until they hold. I went to my room and opened the drawer of the desk and took out the ledger. 14 properties. The numbers I have known by heart since Gerald and I were still young enough to argue about them. The rental income month by month. The equity. The accounts. The value, current appraised value, of the house on Carver Street, which I had last had assessed 8 months ago because I like to know what things are worth and I do not like to be caught not knowing. I ran my finger down the column of numbers the way Gerald used to run his finger down a map, finding where he was. I found where I was. Then I opened the drawer below the ledger and took out a different document. A document that is not in anyone else's files, that has not been discussed at any dinner table, that Jalen does not know exists and Tanya certainly does not. A document I prepared 6 years ago with my attorney, a man named Howard Gaines who went to school with Gerald and who has been handling my legal affairs for 35 years and who, when I explained what I wanted, said only, Eleanor, you always did think 12 steps ahead. I held the document and looked at the window. The wisteria was bare in October, but I know what is underneath it. The same roots Gerald put there. Roots do not leave just because the leaves are gone. I put the document back. I closed the drawer. And I went to make breakfast for my son and his wife and the baby who grips your finger like she is already learning that the world requires you to hold on. I was still thinking. 3 days later, Jalen came to find me in the kitchen on a Sunday morning. He sat at the table across from me with his coffee and his father's jaw and his father's eyes, and after a minute he said, Mom, about the room thing. I said. Tanya is. She's really excited about getting Rosalie set up properly. And she has some ideas about how the space could work and, he paused. I just wanted to hear from you directly. What you're thinking. I looked at my son. This boy I have known since before he had a name. This man who feels things more than he shows and who married a woman who shows more than she feels. And who is currently sitting at my kitchen table trying to navigate between the two of them without anyone losing ground. What I'm thinking, I said, is that this is my house, Jalen. I know. And I invited you here. I know, Mom. And I was happy to do it. I still am. Your daughter is in this house and I am grateful for every single morning I wake up and she is in this house. He nodded. But I need you to understand something. I set my mug down. A woman does not spend 40 years building something so that she can be moved to the smaller room when someone else decides they need more space. I need you to understand that before we have any further conversations about furniture placement. Jalen was quiet for a long time. She's my wife, he said finally. I know she is, I said. And she's living in my house. Both of those things are true at the same time. He left the kitchen without finishing his coffee. I heard him and Tanya talking in low voices upstairs, the particular texture of voices that are trying to be quiet and not quite managing it. I could not make out the words. I did not try. That evening Jalen came back downstairs and said they had decided to give it more time. That Rosalie was fine in the nursery for now. That there was no rush. There is that word again. No rush. I have been hearing it my whole life from people who are rushing. I thanked him. I meant it. I went to bed at my usual time and woke at 4:30 and had my coffee in my window, and I thought, not yet. But soon. I can feel it the way you feel weather before it arrives, not in the sky yet but in your joints in the particular way the air sits still before it moves. I was not wrong. November came. Rosalie grew the way babies grow, not gradually but in sudden leaps, as if she had been consulting a schedule in private. She started sleeping longer and then shorter and then longer again. Tanya started talking about sleep training. Jalen downloaded 3 different apps about infant development. The house organized itself more and more completely around the baby's needs, which is entirely appropriate and which I watched with the quiet pleasure of someone who has been through it and knows that this is exactly how it should be. What was not exactly how it should be was the Sunday night Tanya asked me at dinner whether I had ever thought about whether I needed all the space I currently had. I put my fork down. What does that mean? I asked. Just you have the whole master suite, and with the sitting area and the attached bath it's really more space than one person uses on a daily basis. I was reading that a lot of women in your situation find that downsizing actually. In my situation, I said. I just mean living alone, being retired. I am not retired, I said. I manage 14 properties. I work every day. She blinked. Of course. I just meant. What did you mean, Tanya? The table was quiet. Rosalie was in the baby bouncer on the floor making the sounds she makes when she is satisfied. Little cooing punctuations that had nothing to do with the conversation above her head. Jalen said, Mom. I'm asking Tanya, I said. What did you mean? Tanya set her napkin on the table with a precision that suggested she had been waiting for this conversation. I meant that we have a baby who is going to need more room as she grows. And the arrangement we have right now is generous, but it's not sustainable long-term. And we thought. There's that we again, I said. Jalen and I thought it might be time to think about what makes sense for everyone. I looked at my son. His eyes were on his plate. Jalen, I said. Look at me. He looked up. Did you decide this together? A pause. 1 second. 2. We talked about it, he said. And what did you conclude? Another pause. Longer. And then he said the thing. The thing that moved the needle from where we had been to somewhere else entirely. He said it quietly, the way a man says something he knows is wrong even as he is saying it, the way the knowledge that something is wrong does not always have enough force to stop the saying of it. He said, Mom, we need your room for the baby. The kitchen was very still. Outside, through the window over the sink, the November street was dark and quiet. Inside, the refrigerator hummed. Rosalie cooed at nothing. Tanya had the expression of someone who has been waiting a long time for a particular door to open. I sat with those words for a moment. Sat with them the way you sit with something you need to understand before you respond to it. My son. Gerald's face. Gerald's eyes. Those words coming out of that face. We need your room. Not a question. Not a request. A declaration of need, offered as though need were a form of authority, as though wanting something urgently enough made the wanting into a right. I thought about my mother. I thought about Gerald running his finger down the map. I thought about a document in the drawer of the desk in my room. My room. I stood up from the table. I said, I'm going to make a phone call. Mom. I'll be in my room. I walked down the hall. I did not hurry. I have never in my life hurried away from anything, and I was not about to start at 67. I walked at my own pace, which is the pace of a woman who knows where she is going and has already decided what she will find when she gets there. I closed the door. I sat at the desk. I opened the drawer. I took out the document and set it on the desk, and then I took out my phone, and I scrolled to a name I have had in my contacts for 35 years and I pressed call. Howard Gaines picked up on the second ring. He always does when I call, no matter the hour, because he understood, from the first time we worked together, that I do not call without reason and I do not waste people's time. Eleanor, he said. Howard, I said. I need to see you Monday morning. A pause. Not hesitation, Howard never hesitates. Just the pause of a man locating his calendar in his mind. 8:30, he said. My office. 8:30, I agreed. I ended the call. I sat for a moment in my room, the room with the east and south windows, the room with 31 years in the walls, the room whose view includes Gerald's wisteria, and I held the document in my hands and I thought, all right then. Now we begin. I am going to say something that might be difficult to understand if you have never been in the position of a woman who has spent her whole life building something. I want you to understand that what I felt in that moment was not anger. Anger is what you feel when something surprises you. I had not been surprised. I had been watching this arrive for months, from the first time Tanya moved the photograph, from the first time Patricia rearranged my furniture without asking, from the first dinner table conversation about the back room. I had been watching it arrive the way you watch weather arrive when you already know how to read the sky. What I felt was not anger. What I felt was something colder and more precise than anger. What I felt was clarity. Because there is a particular moment in a woman's life, if she is paying attention, if she has not made the mistake of confusing patience with surrender, when the thing she has been watching finally reveals itself completely, and in that revelation she understands not only what is being done to her but exactly what she has in her hands to answer it with. I had quite a lot in my hands. Jalen did not know how much. Tanya certainly did not. I put the document back in the drawer and closed it, and then I did something I had not planned to do but which felt in the moment entirely right. I went back out to the kitchen. They were still at the table. Tanya was feeding Rosalie. Jalen was on his phone. They both looked up when I came in. I picked up my plate. I took it to the sink and rinsed it and set it in the rack, the way I have done after every dinner in this house for 40 years. And then I turned to face my son and said with complete calm, I'll have an answer for you by the end of the week. Jalen nodded. He thought this meant I was considering it. Tanya smiled. She thought this meant the same thing. They were not wrong exactly. I was considering something, just not what they thought. I went to bed. I woke at 4:30. I had my coffee in my window. The sky was the color it always is just before morning, that particular dark blue that has no word I have ever found adequate for it. I sat with it for a long time. By 5:15 I had finished my coffee and begun making a list. Not a list of what I was going to do exactly. A list of what already existed. What was already in place. What had been in place for years quietly without announcement, without ever being the subject of a dinner conversation. Because I am my mother's daughter and my mother taught me that the most important preparations are the ones you make in private and reveal only when the moment has arrived. The moment had arrived. Picked up my pen. I wrote at the top of the list, in the handwriting I have had since the 3rd grade, what Howard needs to know. And I began. Howard Gaines has an office on the 2nd floor of a building on Bay Street that has not been renovated since 1978, and that smells of paper and old wood, and the particular kind of order that accumulates in places where serious people have spent decades doing serious work. I have always found it calming. Smells like a place where things get decided. I arrived at 8:25. Howard was already at his desk with 2 cups of coffee and my file open in front of him, which told me he had come in early to prepare, which told me he had understood from my voice on the phone that this was not a routine visit. He is 72 years old. He went to school with Gerald at Savannah State, and they played cards together every other Thursday for 11 years before Gerald's hands started to give him trouble. He is a tall man with a white beard and the deliberate manner of someone who has learned, over 50 years of practice, that the most important thing you can do in any legal situation is slow down and make sure you understand what you are actually dealing with before you say a single word about what you plan to do with it. I sat across from him and I told him everything. Not in the way I have told you. Not with the slow accumulation of detail that a story requires, but in the way I would tell Howard, which is to say efficiently and in chronological order with only the facts that bear on the legal and financial situation. I told him about the invitation to Jalen and Tanya, the baby, the progression of small claims on the house, the photograph, the furniture, the front room, and then I told him about Sunday night and Jalen's face and the words, "We need your room for the baby." Howard listened with his hands flat on the desk. He did not take notes. He has never taken notes in my presence. He says he takes notes in private after the meeting when he can think without performing attention. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Where is the document?" he said. "Here." I took it from my bag and set it across the desk to him. He read it. He already knows it, he drafted it, but he read it again carefully the way a doctor rereads a chart when the situation has changed. I drank my coffee. Outside the window, Bay Street was going about its morning. He set the document down. "All right," he said. "What do you want to do?" "I want to do two things," I said. "And I want them done properly and I want them done before the end of this week." "Tell me." I told him. He listened. He asked 3 clarifying questions, the kind that are not really questions but are a lawyer's way of confirming he has understood not just the words but the intent behind them. I answered all 3 clearly. He nodded after each one. When I finished, he said, "Eleanor, are you certain about all of this?" "Howard," I said, "I have been certain about this for longer than my son has been thinking about it." He almost smiled. Gerald used to say Howard had a face that smiled on the inside. You could always tell it was happening but you rarely saw it in full. "I'll have the first document ready by Wednesday," he said. "The second will take until Friday." "Friday is fine," I said. "And you're not going to say anything to them before Friday?" "No," I said. "I'm going to be very ordinary between now and Friday." "Good," he said. "Don't do anything that could be interpreted as retaliation. Don't move anything, don't say anything that sounds like a threat. Don't." "Howard," I said, "I raised 2 boys in that house. I know how to behave." He did smile then. Just briefly. I drove home and I was very ordinary. The hardest thing about being very ordinary when you have decided something is managing the version of yourself that wants to be seen. There is a particular temptation when you are the person who knows something that other people do not know yet, to leave the door slightly ajar, to say something with a double meaning, to let something show in your expression, to arrange things slightly differently so that later, when the truth arrives, people will say, "I should have seen it. She was telling us the whole time." I do not indulge that temptation. I have never found vanity useful and I do not plan to start. So I cooked. I helped with Rosalie at the times when Tanya needed an extra set of hands and withdrew when she did not. I kept my accounts and answered my tenants' emails and paid the property insurance on time, the way I pay every bill on time. I sat at dinner and ate what was served and said what was appropriate and retired to my room at my usual hour. I was very ordinary. Tanya, I noticed, was being careful with me that week. There was a quality to her carefulness, it had the texture of strategy rather than feeling, the way you are careful with something you are about to ask something of. She complimented my cooking on Monday and helped clear the table on Tuesday and asked about my properties on Wednesday in a way that was genuinely curious and that I answered honestly because the properties are not a secret and never have been, and if anything, her curiosity about them was useful. Let her think about the properties. Let her do the arithmetic. Let her wonder. On Thursday evening, Jalen asked me again. He came into the kitchen while I was washing the dinner dishes and he leaned against the counter the way he has leaned against that counter since he was 11 years old, and he said, "Mom, you said by the end of the week." "I did," I said. "It's Thursday." "I know what day it is, Jalen." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "She's really hoping you'll consider the front room. She has it all pictured, she's been looking at furniture, ways to make it really nice for you. She wants it to feel like a real space, not like you're just moving me," I said. He flinched. Slightly. He does not know I see it when he flinches, but I always have. "That's not what this is," he said. "I know," I said. And I meant it, in a way. It was not what he wanted it to be. It was simply what it was, which is not always the same as what we want. "I'll have your answer by the end of the week." I said that and I meant it. He nodded and left the kitchen and I finished the dishes. Friday morning, Howard called at 8 o'clock. "Everything's ready," he said. You can come in this afternoon, or I can send them electronically if you prefer to review first. Send them, I said. I'll review and call you if I have questions. You won't have questions, he said. It's exactly what you asked for. I thanked him and set my phone on the desk and opened my laptop and waited for the email. It came at 8:17. I read both documents twice. Howard was right, I had no questions. Everything was exactly as I had asked for. Exactly as I had conceived it, sitting in my room on Sunday night with the November dark outside and my son's words still in the room with me. I printed both documents on the printer I keep in my room, which Tanya has never once been curious about, which tells you something about the kind of attention she pays to the things in this house that do not directly concern her. I sat with the printed documents for a moment. Just a moment. The way you sit before you walk into a room where something important is about to happen. Then I went to make everyone breakfast. Rosalie was in the high chair. She had recently graduated to the high chair, which Tanya had announced with the pride of someone witnessing a personal achievement, and she was handling a piece of soft banana with the focused intensity that babies bring to every new thing. I looked at her little hands. I looked at the way she concentrated. I thought about Gerald's grip, how even at the end his hands were strong when they needed to be. Good morning, Tanya said, coming in from the hallway. Morning, I said. I put the kettle on. Sleep all right? Better. She only woke up once. Tanya sat at the table and looked at Rosalie with the particular love of a new mother that has nothing performed in it, that is entirely real and entirely her own. Whatever else I think about Tanya, I do not doubt that love. I have never doubted it. Jalen came in at 7:45, already dressed. He poured his coffee and stood at the counter and looked at me. Tonight, he said. Tonight, I agreed. He nodded. He looked relieved, which told me he had been telling himself all week that my answer was going to be yes, that I was simply taking my time about arriving at it. People tend to believe what is convenient for them to believe. It is one of the most reliable things about people. I spent the day doing what I always do. Accounts in the morning. 2 tenant calls. A drive by the Hanover Street duplex, which had a gutter that needed attention. Grocery shopping in the afternoon. Back home by 4. Rosalie asleep in the bedroom. Tanya in the living room on her laptop. The house quiet in the way it is quiet in the late afternoon of winter, when the light goes early and the day folds up before you expect it to. I set the grocery bags on the counter and started putting things away. After a moment, Tanya came to the kitchen doorway. Can I help? She offered. I'm fine, I said. Thank you. She lingered. She had something she wanted to say and was deciding whether to say it. I want you to know, she said finally, that I know this has been a hard adjustment, moving in with us, having to share the space. I know it hasn't been easy and I want you to know that I appreciate everything you've done for us. I turned from the cabinet. I looked at her. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, which is where people in this house stand when they have come to say something difficult. Jalen stands there. His brother stands there when he visits. Gerald used to stand there when he had something to tell me that he was not sure I wanted to hear. I appreciate that, I said. I do. I just want us to get to a good place. With the rooms and everything. I want it to feel like, she paused. Like we figured it out together. I said. So tonight when you give us your answer, she smiled. Not the assessor's smile. Something closer to real. Whatever you decide, I want you to know we'll work with you. We want you to be comfortable. That means a lot, I said. And I turned back to the cabinet because I was done with that part of the conversation and because I have learned in 67 years that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is not let them see your face when you are thinking what you are thinking. Dinner was spaghetti which I made from scratch the way I always do, the way my mother taught me, with a sauce that takes 40 minutes and smells like something that belongs in a real kitchen and not in a jar. Tanya set the table. Jalen poured the wine. Rosalie sat in her high chair with pieces of soft pasta and lived, as she always lives, entirely in the present moment. We ate. We talked about ordinary things. The gutters on the Hanover Street duplex. A movie Jalen had watched. Rosalie's new sound, a consonant she had discovered that week, and was deploying at every opportunity with the enthusiasm of a scientist who has made a breakthrough. When we had finished eating and the plates were cleared, I cleared them. It is my house. Jalen looked at me across the table. Mom, he said. You said you'd have an answer. I do, I said. I went to my room. I came back to the kitchen table with the 2 documents Howard had prepared, and I set them down between us, face up, in the order I wanted them to be read. Tanya leaned forward. Jalen looked at the top of the first page. What is this? He said. The first one, I said, is the deed to this house. Tanya went very still. You already know your name is on it, I said to Jalen, because I told you that when your father died and we restructured the estate. What you may not have read carefully enough is the page 4 clause. Jalen was already turning to page 4. I watched his eyes move across the language Howard had drafted 6 years ago and which I had signed and notarized and filed with the county and then placed in a drawer in my room without ever mentioning it to anyone, because there are things you do for protection that you put away and hope you never need, the way you buy insurance for a house you love and never want to see burn. His face changed. Slowly. The way faces change when they are reading something that is rearranging their understanding of something they thought they already understood. Life estate, he said. Life estate, I confirmed. The house is in your name, Jalen. It has been for 6 years. But I have the legal right to live in this house, occupy it fully, and make decisions about its domestic use for as long as I am alive. I cannot be removed. I cannot be asked to occupy a lesser portion of it. I cannot be relocated within it without my own consent. Tanya's hand was on the table. Flat. Perfectly still. The second document, I said, is something different. I let Jalen turn to it himself. He read the title. He read the first paragraph. He set the paper down and looked at me with the expression of a man who has been given information he does not yet know what to do with. He said, Mom, how long has this existed? A while, I said. Why didn't you? Because you didn't need to know until now, I said. And now you need to know. Tanya reached across and picked up the second document. She read it more slowly than Jalen had, more carefully, the way someone reads something when they are looking for the way out of it. I watched her read it. I have spent enough time in rooms with people reading important documents to know what the face looks like when the search for the exit fails. Her face, when she set the paper down, was very composed. She is a woman who can compose her face when she needs to. I will give her that. She said carefully. I didn't know the company was this size. No, I said. You didn't. And the properties are mine, I said. Legally, operationally, entirely mine. I am not retired. I have not been retired a single day of my life. The company is 31 years old and is valued. I gave her the number plainly, the way you give someone a number you want them to sit with. At the most recent appraisal, the kitchen was very quiet. Rosalie said her new consonant. Nobody responded to it. I'm going to stay in my room, I said. I said it pleasantly, the way you say a thing that has already been decided and only needs to be stated. I am going to continue to live in this house as I have always lived in it. You are welcome here for as long as you need to be here. And I love my granddaughter, and I have every intention of being a present and useful grandmother to her. But I am not moving to the front room, and the master bedroom is not going to be converted to anything, and we are not going to have this conversation again. Jalen was looking at the document. He was still reading it again or simply staring at it the way you stare at something when your mind is working faster than your eyes. Mom, he said, quietly. The way he says it when he is not performing anything, when it is just the word. I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. And I was not unkind when I said it. That's something we're going to need to talk about. But not tonight. I stood up. I looked at Tanya. She met my eyes. She is a woman with a great deal of composure, but there are limits to composure, and she had reached some of them. I am glad you're here, I said to her, because it was true in the ways that mattered. I am glad the baby is here. I want this to work. She nodded. She did not speak. Good night, I said. I went to my room. My room. The room with the east and south windows and Gerald's wisteria outside and 31 years in the walls. I closed the door and sat at the desk, and I did not feel triumphant. I want to be clear about that. I did not feel triumphant. I felt the particular feeling of a woman who has done what needed to be done, and is now sitting with the weight of it, which is never as light as you might expect. I thought about Jalen's face. About the word Mom said in the kitchen without anything extra in it. I thought about Rosalie's hands. I thought about Gerald running his finger down the map, finding where he was. I picked up my pen and I turned to a blank page in my ledger. Not the financial ledger but the other one, the smaller one I have kept for years for the thoughts that don't fit anywhere else. And I wrote one line. It is not about being right. It is about not disappearing. Then I put down my pen and went to bed. I woke at 4:30 as I always do. I had my coffee. I had my window. The November dark was doing what November dark does, holding itself still until it has to become morning. And I sat with my hands around my mug and I thought, this is not over. This was not an ending. This was a door that I have opened, and now I need to know what is on the other side of it, and there are only two ways to find out. You can walk through, or you can wait for what comes through to you. I have never in my life been a woman who waits when she can walk. I set my mug down. I picked up my phone. And I called Marcus. Marcus answered on the third ring. He always answers on the third ring when it is early and I am calling, because he has learned over 50-some years that his mother does not call at 4:30 in the morning without a reason, and the reason is never small, and the right response is to pick up before it goes to voicemail and let her say whatever she is called to say. Mom. His voice had sleep in it but not confusion. He was already sitting up. I'm all right, I said before he could ask. Nobody is hurt. I just needed to hear your voice. A pause. What happened? I told him. Not everything. Not the documents, not Howard, not the full extent of what I had set in motion the night before. Just the outline. The room conversation. Jalen's words. The dinner. Marcus listened the way Marcus always listens, which is the way his father listened, thoroughly, without inserting himself, without rushing to fix things before he understood them. When I finished, there was a silence that was not empty but full, the kind of silence that means a person is actually thinking rather than composing a response. Then he said, How are you doing, Mom? Not what happened. How are you? It is the right question. It is always the right question. I sat with it for a moment. I'm steady, I said. I'm clear. Okay, he said. That's you saying you've already decided something. I've already done something, I said. I'm calling to tell you before it becomes news. I told him about the documents. About Howard. About the dinner and Tanya's face and Jalen reading page 4 of the deed. I told him about the company valuation which he did not know, and I heard the quality of his silence change, become larger, the way a room changes when you turn on a light in it. Mom, he said. I didn't know it was that size. I know you didn't. You've been working, I said. Yes. I've been working. That's what I do. Another silence. Then, what do you need from me? I need you to know, I said. I need someone in this family to know the whole picture before things develop further. And I need you to stay where you are for now because if you come down here right now it will look like a coalition, and I am not running a coalition. I am handling this myself. Are you sure you don't want? Marcus. Right, he said. You're sure? I'm sure. Okay. He exhaled. I'm here. Call me when things move. I will. I ended the call and sat in the dark kitchen for another few minutes, listening to the house breathe. That is the only way I know to describe what a house does at 4:30 in the morning. It breathes. All the small sounds of it, the settling, the hum of the refrigerator, the particular creak of the hallway floor that has been there since 1991 and that I navigate without thinking the way you navigate everything you have lived with long enough. All of it together makes a sound that is not quite sound, more like presence. The presence of a house that has held people for a long time. I wanted to hold it back. I wanted to stay in it the way it was right now, in the dark, before anything had to be resolved or renegotiated or re-understood. I wanted to sit with my coffee in my window and the house breathing around me, and not need anything to happen next. But things were going to happen next. I had set them in motion. That is the thing about decisions, once you make them, they have their own momentum, and the only question is whether you are going to run ahead of that momentum or let it carry you somewhere you did not intend. I have always run ahead. I rinsed my mug. I went back to bed. I slept until 6:15, which is late for me, which told me that whatever calm I was presenting to the world, my body understood it was spending something. The house was different that Saturday morning. Not dramatically, not in any way you could point to, but in the way that all houses are different after something true has been said in them. The air carries it. The walls hold it. You walk through the rooms and you can feel where the conversation happened, the particular weight of it still sitting at the kitchen table like a guest who has not yet decided to leave. Jalen was in the kitchen when I came down. He was at the counter with his back to the door, making toast, and the set of his shoulders told me everything I needed to know about what kind of night he had had. I poured my coffee. I sat at the table. He turned around. His face had the look of a man who has been awake for several hours doing the work of re-understanding something he thought he understood. It is a specific look. I know it because I have worn it myself, and because I watched Gerald wear it more than once over the course of our marriage, and because it is the look that precedes the only conversations that actually matter. "Mom," he said. "Sit down," I said. He sat. For a moment neither of us said anything. The toast popped. He left it in the toaster. "How much of that did you know?" I asked. "Before last night. I knew about the properties," he said. "In general. I knew you and Dad had investments. I didn't know," he stopped. Looked at his hands. "I didn't know the scale of it. You never talked about numbers." "No," I said. "I didn't." "The life estate clause," he said. "That's been there for 6 years." "Yes." "You never said anything about it." "No." He was quiet for a moment. "Why?" I considered the question carefully because it deserved to be considered carefully. Why do you protect yourself quietly rather than loudly? Why do you prepare rather than announce? Why do you build the wall before you know you need it rather than waiting until the water is rising? Because preparation is not a threat, I said. And I didn't want it to be interpreted as one. I made that arrangement to protect what Gerald and I built, not to use against anyone. It only became relevant when someone suggested I should be moved to the smaller room, so the baby could have my space. He flinched. The same small flinch from the night before. He does it when something lands accurately. "I didn't mean it that way," he said. "I know you didn't." "Tanya." He stopped. "Tanya has ideas about what makes sense," I said. "I understand that. She is not a villain in this, Jalen. She is a woman who was given a situation and began organizing it the way she organizes things. I don't fault her for that. What I cannot do is allow it to continue in a direction that ends with me living differently in my own house, because someone else decided my needs were less pressing than their preferences." He looked at me for a long time. "Tanya didn't sleep," he said. "I imagine she didn't. She's upset." "I expect so. She feels like she walked into something. Like you had all of this and you just waited." I turned my mug in my hands. "I had all of this because I spent 40 years building it. And I didn't wait exactly. I watched. There's a difference." He was quiet. "I want you here," I said. And I meant it. I want Rosalie here. I want to watch her grow up in this house the way you grew up in this house. And I want to be the grandmother who is present, who is known, who is not a figure on the periphery. That is what I want. What I cannot do is be that grandmother from the front room. Jalen picked up his toast. He did not eat it. He set it on the plate and sat with it. "She's going to want to talk to you," he said. "I know. Today probably." "I'm here," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." He almost smiled. Almost. Tanya came downstairs at 9 with Rosalie on her hip. She had dressed carefully, which I noticed, not as a vanity observation but as an intelligence one. A woman who dresses carefully for a difficult conversation is a woman who has decided the conversation is going to happen, and has prepared herself for it. I respected that. I have done it myself. She fed Rosalie. I made another pot of coffee. Jalen took the baby to the living room after a few minutes, in the careful way of a man who knows that the conversation that needs to happen is not his to be in, and the 3 of us were in the kitchen. 2 of us in the coffee pot. Tanya sat across from me. "I want to say something," she said. "Go ahead," I said. She had rehearsed it. I could tell, not because it sounded hollow but because it had a shape, a beginning and a middle and an end, the way things have a shape when you have built them deliberately. She said that she had not meant to make me feel displaced, that she had been focused on the baby and on making the arrangement work for everyone, and that somewhere in that focus she paused here looking for a word, overstepped, that she understood now that she had not fully understood what she was stepping into, and that she was sorry for the way the room conversation had gone, and the previous room conversations, and the way the house had been rearranged piece by piece over the months. She said all of this clearly and without performing emotion, which is the way I prefer apologies. Emotion in an apology often belongs to the person apologizing rather than the person wronged, and I have never found it useful. When she finished, I said, "I appreciate that." She nodded. "I want to say something back," I said. "And I want you to hear it as information rather than as an accusation, because it is not an accusation. It is just the truth about what happened, which I think matters for what happens next." She held my gaze. She is a woman with backbone when she needs it, and right now she needed it and she was using it. "You came into this house," I said, "and you began making it yours in ways that were not yours to make. Small things at first, the photograph, the pantry, the furniture. Then larger things, the room assignments, the conversations about what I needed versus what you wanted. And each time I said nothing, which I now understand you may have read as agreement, when what it actually was patience." She was very still. "I have been patient in this house for my whole life," I said. "I know the difference between patience and surrender. I was patient. I was not surrendering. The difference is that patience can end." Tanya looked at the table for a moment. Then she looked up. "The document," she said. "The company. You never mentioned." "No," I said. "Jalen had no idea." "Jalen has access to everything he has ever asked about," I said. "He didn't ask. You didn't ask. I don't advertise my business affairs to people who haven't expressed an interest in them." She absorbed this. I could see her doing it, reorganizing her understanding of the past 18 months, re-examining the assumptions she had made about me, about the house, about the situation she and Jalen had walked into when they accepted my invitation. The photograph. The pantry. We thought she was a widow living alone in a house she needed help managing. We were wrong about all of it. "What happens now?" she said. "What happens now," I said, "is that we try again. With accurate information this time. And the room is not a conversation we're having again," I said. "Not because I am being rigid, but because I want you to understand clearly that the house is mine and I live in it as I choose to live in it. That is not a negotiating position. That is just the truth." She nodded. It was not a happy nod. It was not an unhappy one either. It was the nod of a woman who has encountered a wall and is deciding what to do with that information, not whether to be angry about the wall's existence, but what the next intelligent move is, given that the wall is there. I found that I respected her for it. We were quiet for a moment, the two of us in the kitchen that is mine. "I want to make this work," she said. "I really do." "So do I said. Rosalie called from the living room, not in distress, just in the way she calls when she has become tired of the situation she is currently in and wants to know if a different situation is available. Tanya pushed back from the table and went to her, and I sat with my coffee and the particular quality of Saturday morning light that comes through the window over the sink in November, and I thought, all right. One thing settled. But there was still the second document. And what it meant. Megaphone, if this story has found you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you never miss a new story from Linda's Life Diaries. The best ones are still coming. And the people who watch to the end are exactly the ones who need to hear them. Howard Gaines called me the following Tuesday. "I have something you should know," he said, and I heard in his voice the particular quality that distinguishes information from small talk, the way a doctor's voice changes just slightly before they tell you something you need to sit down for. I sat down. "Tell me," I said. "I received a call this morning," he said, "from an attorney named Gerald Stanton. He represents..." "Tanya," I said. "A beat." "Yes. You expected this." "I expected something," I said. "What did he want?" Howard explained. It was not a legal action, not yet, and possibly not ever, because Howard had explained to Gerald Stanton calmly and in some detail what the legal landscape looked like from my side, and Gerald Stanton had understood quickly, as competent attorneys do, that the landscape was not favorable to the position he had been asked to explore. What Tanya had apparently asked her attorney to look into was whether the life estate clause was challengeable, whether there was any argument to be made about the circumstances under which I had executed the document, my mental state at the time, any suggestion of Howard paused here, selecting the word carefully, diminished capacity. I was very quiet. "Diminished capacity," I said. "It was a preliminary inquiry," Howard said. Stanton was careful about how he phrased it. I don't believe he has any intention of pursuing it. But I want you to know it was asked. I sat with that for a long time. Diminished capacity. The suggestion, not made openly, not made in front of me, not made in any context where I could respond to it directly, that perhaps the document I had prepared and signed and filed 6 years ago had been prepared and signed and filed by a woman who was not fully herself. That perhaps the arrangements I had made for my own protection were the arrangements of a woman who could not be trusted to make them for herself. In this house. In my kitchen. In the house where I had raised my children and kept my accounts and managed my properties and made every decision of consequence in my life for 40 years. I heard what it was saying about me. I heard it very clearly. "Eleanor," Howard said. "Are you there?" "I'm here," I said. "This doesn't change anything legally. Your position is entirely solid." Stanton knew it before I told him and he knows it better now. "I know," I said. "I want to make sure you understand." "Howard," I said. "I'm not worried about the legal position. I'm thinking about something else." He waited. "I'm thinking about the fact that my daughter-in-law, who is living in my house, eating food I cook, in a situation I created out of generosity, went to an attorney to explore whether I could be classified as cognitively impaired in order to challenge the legal arrangements I made to protect myself." A pause. "Yes," he said. "That is what happened." I looked at the window. November was doing what November does, pressing the light down, making everything outside look like a study in patience. The wisteria was bare. The roots were there. Roots do not leave because the leaves are gone. I have always believed that. I believe it now. "All right," I said. "Thank you for telling me. What do you want to do?" "Nothing yet," I said. "Keep everything exactly as it is. Don't respond to Stanton further. Don't make any moves. Just let it sit." "And the second document?" Howard said. "The second document stays where it is," I said. "For now." "Understood. And Howard, thank you for calling me right away." "Eleanor," he said. "Always." I put the phone down. I sat very still in my room. There is a particular kind of anger that has no heat in it. I have felt regular anger. The heat that rises when something is unfair and you are close enough to it to feel the temperature. I have felt that anger in my life plenty of times. What I felt sitting in my room on that Tuesday morning was something else. It was the cold kind. The kind that has been waiting for confirmation. The kind that, once it arrives, does not go away because it is not based on feeling. It is based on information. Tanya had looked at me across the kitchen table Saturday morning and told me she wanted to make this work. And on Tuesday she was talking to an attorney about diminished capacity. I thought about the morning she moved the photograph. I thought about the Sunday night dinner. I thought about the word "we" and what it had started to mean every time I heard it in my own kitchen, spoken by a woman who had made a careful study of what she was walking into without ever once asking the woman who built it what she thought. I thought about Rosalie. I thought about Rosalie's hands. And I thought, this is the thing that has to be weighed. On one side, everything I have just described, the photograph, the furniture, the room, the attorney, the words diminished capacity typed into a search query or spoken across a phone line by someone who lives under my roof. On the other side, a baby girl who grips your finger like she is already learning the world requires you to hold on. I was not going to let the second thing disappear because of the first, but I was also not going to let the first thing continue as though it had not happened. The problem with a house full of people who are not being honest with each other is that the dishonesty compounds. It spreads the way damp spreads in old walls, quietly behind surfaces that look solid, until one day something gives and the damage is everywhere, and you are standing there wondering how you missed it. I had not missed it. I had watched it happen in real time and said almost nothing and waited, and now I had enough information to know that waiting further was not patience. It was something else. I called Celeste. Celeste Walker has been my closest friend for 38 years. We met at the county records office in 1986 and we have survived between us. 2 husbands lost, 3 children raised, 4 houses moved between us, more arguments than I can count, and the kind of history that means you do not have to explain context before you get to the thing you actually need to say. I told her about Tuesday, about Howard's call, about the attorney and the phrase that had been used. She was quiet for a moment. "Eleanor," she said. "I know," I said. "That child is living in your house." "I know." "And she?" "I know, Celeste." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to let things develop." I said. A little longer. I want to see what she does with the information that her inquiry went nowhere. Whether she escalates or whether she recedes. People tell you a great deal about themselves in the moment after they've been told no. Celeste was quiet. Then, you sound like Howard. Howard has been a good influence on me for 35 years. What does Marcus say? Marcus knows most of it. Not Tuesday yet. Are you going to tell Jalen? This was the question. This was the question I had been sitting with since I put the phone down after Howard's call. Whether to tell Jalen what his wife had done. Whether the information was his to have immediately, or whether giving it to him immediately served anything other than the desire to have it known. A marriage is a complicated thing. Jalen loves Tanya. He has chosen her, and that choice is his to make and his to live with, and I am not in the business of dismantling marriages, even imperfect ones. What I am in the business of is protecting what is mine and deciding how things go in the house that belongs to me. Not yet, I said. I don't know yet. Eleanor. I know. I'll figure it out. Be careful, Celeste said. Not for your sake. I know you can handle yourself. For his sake. He's in the middle of this whether he knows it or not. I know, I said. That's what I'm thinking about. I spent the next week observing. I am, when I need to be, a very good observer. 40 years of running a small business will teach you that, will teach you to watch how people behave when they think they are not being watched, to notice what is said and what is conspicuously not said, to pay attention to the texture of ordinary interactions for evidence of what is happening underneath them. Tanya was behaving differently. Not dramatically. Not in any way that Jalen would have caught. But there were small calibrations in how she moved through the house, how she spoke to me at mealtimes, the particular way she avoided meeting my eyes for more than a moment. She had received information on Tuesday, Stanton had called her after Howard, and she was adjusting to it the way a navigator adjusts to new coordinates quietly, without announcing the adjustment. She stopped mentioning the rooms. She started helping with dinner. She brought Rosalie to me one afternoon without being asked, just walked into the room where I was doing my accounts and said, "I think she wants you," and handed me the baby and left. I sat with Rosalie on my lap and my ledger open on the desk, and I thought about what that gesture was trying to do and whether it was genuine. I decided it was both, that Tanya is a person capable of genuine warmth and of deploying it strategically at the same time, which is not a contradiction. It is just the complexity of actual people. I accepted the gesture. I rocked the baby. I did not lower my guard. 3 weeks after Howard's call, I had a conversation with Jalen that I had not planned and that I would not have chosen, but that arrived the way some conversations arrive, because the pressure of unspoken things eventually finds a crack. He came home from work on a Wednesday evening looking like a man who has been carrying something all day. I have raised him. I know what he looks like when he is carrying something. I said nothing at dinner, just watched, and after Tanya had put Rosalie down and gone upstairs, Jalen stayed at the kitchen table. "Mom," he said. Tanya told me." I looked up. "About calling the attorney," he said. "She told me tonight. She said she wanted me to hear it from her." He paused. "She said she was wrong to do it." I set down my fork. "Did she?" I said. "She said she was scared. After the dinner with the documents. She felt like the ground shifted and she panicked and she called Stanton and she wasn't thinking clearly." "That may be true," I said. "She knows it was wrong." "I'm glad she told you," I said. He looked at his hands. "I didn't know," he said. "I want you to know that. If she had told me she was doing it, I would have told her not to. I believe you." "Mom," he stopped. Started again. "I'm sorry. For my part in all of this. The room thing, the way I said it, the way we..." Another stop. "I think somewhere in the last few months I forgot who you are. Not who you are to me. Who you are, period. And that was my failure." I sat with that. It is one of the most difficult things in a parent's life. The moment when a child says something so precisely true and so precisely painful that you cannot respond to it without being completely honest, and being completely honest requires you to acknowledge that you also played a part, that you allowed things to develop rather than interrupting them, that patience is sometimes its own kind of failing. "You didn't forget," I said. "You just didn't ask. And I didn't tell. We've both been operating on incomplete information. I should have asked." "Yes," I said. "You should have. And I should have offered." We can both be right about that. He nodded. I want to stay, he said. We both do. Tanya does, genuinely. And I want Rosalie to grow up knowing this house. Knowing you. That's what I want too, I said. But you have the second document. There it was. The thing that had been sitting at the edge of every conversation since the dinner 3 weeks ago. The second document, which Jalen had read and which he had not asked me about directly until now, because some information takes time to become a question. Yes, I said. What does it mean? He said. For us. Long term. I looked at my son. Gerald's face. Gerald's eyes. The man who feels things more than he shows, who chose a woman who shows more than she feels, who is sitting at my kitchen table trying to understand the full shape of the life I have built and what it means for the life he is building. It means, I said, that nothing about your inheritance is guaranteed by assumption. It means that I am still the person who makes decisions about this estate, and I make those decisions based on my own judgment about what is right, which includes, and has always included, what I observe about how the people in my life conduct themselves. He was very still. It doesn't mean I have decided anything, I said. It means I have the capacity to decide. That capacity has always existed. What changed is that you know about it now. Because of the room, he said. Because of everything, I said. The room was just the moment when it became relevant to say it out loud. He nodded slowly. He was thinking. I could see him thinking the way his father used to think. Not noisily, not with his face, but with a stillness that had work in it. What do we do now? He said. Now, I said. We figure out how to live in this house honestly. All three of us. Without anyone assuming that my patience means my agreement, and without anyone making decisions about my space or my affairs without my knowledge and my consent. And if we do that, he said, if we actually do that, then we see, I said. I'm not making promises about documents. I'm telling you what I need, and I'm telling you I'm watching, and I'm telling you that what I see matters. He looked at me for a long moment. You sound like Dad, he said. Good, I said. He was right about most things. He almost laughed. Almost. It was enough. We sat at the kitchen table a little longer, the two of us in the house where he grew up. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, Rosalie made a small sound in her sleep. The wisteria was bare outside. The roots were there. I poured us both more coffee. And we sat, and I thought about what had been planted and what was still growing and what it would look like when spring came. And whether the thing I was watching, this family, this attempt, this complicated arrangement of people who love each other and have hurt each other and are now trying to find their footing in the same house, would hold. I thought about Gerald. I thought about the second document in the drawer. I thought about Rosalie's hands. And I thought, the next move is theirs. I have done what I needed to do. I have made visible what needed to be visible. Now I watch and I wait, and I remain exactly where I have always been. In my room, in my house, at my kitchen table, with my coffee in my window and 31 years of wisteria outside. I am not going anywhere. I never was. What happened next happened in February, and I want to tell you about it carefully because it is the part of this story that changed everything. Not the part that resolved it, but the part that made resolution possible, which is a different and more important thing. February, and a letter arrived. Not email. An actual letter, in an envelope, with a handwritten address. I recognize the return address because I have been receiving correspondence from that address for 11 years. It was from the law firm that manages the estate of my late sister-in-law, Patricia Marsh, Gerald's sister, who died 11 years ago and who had no children and who had, in her quiet and precise way, arranged her affairs very specifically before she went. Patricia was a woman who said little and meant everything she said, which is the disposition I admired most in any person I have ever known. And she and I understood each other in that particular way of two women who have both learned that understanding runs deeper than affection, though in our case there was affection too. The letter was from the estate attorney. It was notification of the final distribution of Patricia's estate, which had been held in trust for 11 years pending the resolution of a specific condition Patricia had set, a condition that had now been met, which is why the letter was arriving now, in February, after all this time. I read the letter once. Then I read it again. Then I sat for a long time with it in my hands and I thought about Patricia, about her face, about the particular way she used to look at Gerald when she thought he was being careless about something important, and I thought, you knew. You always knew. I thought about the number in the letter. I thought about what that number added to everything else meant. And I thought, the second document is going to need to be revisited. Not because anything has changed about my intentions, but because the landscape has changed, and landscapes have to be read accurately, or you walk off the edge of something you didn't see coming. I called Howard. He picked up on the second ring. I received a letter, I said. From Kellerman and Associates, he said. Yes. They copied me. You knew this was coming. I knew it was a possibility. The condition Patricia set was not certain to be met. It was met last month. And the amount? Yes, he said. It's substantial. I closed my eyes for a moment, opened them. How substantial, I said, even though I already knew because I had read the letter twice, in relation to the existing estate. Howard told me. He had already done the arithmetic, which is why I keep him. I sat with the revised number. Eleanor, Howard said. This changes the picture considerably. I know, I said. It also changes certain considerations around the second document. I know that too. Do you want to come in this week? Friday, I said. 8:30. I'll be here, he said. I put the phone down. I looked at the window. February light is different from November light. Thinner, more tentative, as though the sun is not yet sure it has permission to stay. The wisteria was still bare. But I know wisteria. I know what is coming. I know that bare branches are not the whole story, only the current chapter, and that the roots underneath are already doing what roots do in winter, working in the dark without announcement, preparing for something no one can see yet. Friday was coming. Howard's office and its smell of paper and wood and serious decisions. And something was going to happen there that I had not fully anticipated when I first sat across from that desk in November and told him what I wanted. Something that was going to require me to think very carefully about what I actually wanted. Not what I needed. Not what was just. Not what the documents supported. What I wanted. For Rosalie. For Jalen. For the house on Carver Street and the wisteria in Gerald's memory, and everything that does not appear in a ledger but has value that no appraisal can capture. I have been building things my whole life. The question, the real question, the one that Howard's office in February light and Patricia's letter was moving me toward, was what I was building now. And for whom? Picked up my pen. I opened the smaller ledger, the one I keep for thoughts that don't fit elsewhere. I turned to a new page. And I began again to think. Howard's office on a Friday morning in February is the same as Howard's office on any other morning in any other month. The same smell of paper and wood. The same quality of order that has accumulated over 50 years of serious work. The same 2 cups of coffee already on the desk when I arrive. But the morning feels different, and I think Howard feels it too because he is more still than usual when I sit down, the kind of stillness that precedes something important. I put Patricia's letter on the desk between us. He looked at it, though he has already read his copy. Sometimes you need to look at the physical thing to know what you actually think about it. Tell me what you're thinking, he said. I'm thinking, I said. That Patricia always knew more than she said. And that she set that condition for a specific reason. The condition was that the trust remain intact until the youngest living child of either of her brothers reached the age of 1 year, Howard said. Rosalie turned 1 in July. I know, I said. Patricia couldn't have known Rosalie was coming. She set that condition 11 years ago. She said it because she believed in children, I said. She believed in the idea of them. She didn't know which child. She knew that if there was one, they would deserve it. Howard turned his coffee cup in his hands. He does this when he is thinking about something he is not certain how to say. Eleanor, he said. The amount in that letter, combined with the existing estate, changes the conversation around the second document significantly. I know, I said. It changes it in a direction that affects not just Jalen and Tanya. It affects Rosalie long-term, in ways that are worth considering carefully. That's why I'm here, I said. He nodded. Then let me ask you directly. When you instructed me to prepare the second document, the revised estate arrangement, what was driving that? The room? Tanya. The specific incident. I thought about the question. It deserved to be thought about, not answered reflexively. What was driving it, I said slowly, was the recognition that I had made assumptions about people that turned out to be wrong. I assumed that being invited into this house meant something to them that it didn't mean. I assumed that my presence in it, my ownership of it, my history in it was legible to them. And when it became clear that it wasn't, that Tanya was making plans about this house as though it were a space to be reorganized rather than a life to be respected, I needed to make sure that the legal reality matched what I had always believed the moral reality to be. And now, he said. Now, I said, the situation has changed. Tanya told Jalen about the attorney. She told him herself without being forced to. That is not nothing. No, Howard agreed. It isn't. And the conversation Jalen and I had, the real one, the one where he said he had forgotten who I was, that conversation was honest in a way I did not expect and did not plan for. Honest things deserve to be responded to honestly. So you're reconsidering. I'm thinking, I said. There is a difference. Howard almost smiled. The second document, I said, was protective. It was written in the language of someone who needed protection. And I needed it in November. I needed it to be written and I needed them to know it existed. I paused. But I am not sure that I need it to be the final word. Howard set down his cup. He folded his hands on the desk. What do you want it to say instead? This was the question I had been building toward since February arrived and brought Patricia's letter with it. What do I want? Not what do I need, not what is just, not what is defensible. What do I want for the life I am living and the house I am keeping and the granddaughter who grips my finger like she is already learning that the world requires you to hold on? I told him. It took about 20 minutes. He asked questions, I answered them, and by the end of it the shape of something new was on the desk between us, not yet written, not yet formal, but present in the way that real things are present before they have found their final form. Howard looked at his notes. This is more generous than the second document, he said. Yes, I said. Are you certain? I'm certain that being right and being generous are not the same thing, I said. And I have spent enough of my life being right. I would like to spend some of it being generous. He nodded. Not the nod of a man who is agreeing with you because you are his client. The nod of a man who has known you for 35 years and believes you have arrived, after considerable journey, at something true. I'll have a draft by the end of next week, he said. Good, I said. I drove home through February light. Thin light, uncertain light, the kind that is making up its mind. The streets of Savannah in February have a particular quality, not cold enough to be winter, not warm enough to be anything else, just suspended between what they have been and what they will become. I know that feeling. I have been in it myself. I thought about what I was going to do when I got home. I had not told Jalen about Patricia's letter. I had not told Tanya. I had been carrying it for 5 days since it arrived, turning it over the way you turn over something you need to understand from every angle before you know what to do with it. Now I understood. Now I knew what I was going to do. I parked in front of the house. Sat in the car for a moment. The wisteria was still bare, but the light was different on it than it had been in November, thinner, yes, but reaching. Trying for something. I went inside. Rosalie was in the kitchen in her high chair, and Tanya was at the counter, and the smell in the house was coffee and something baking, and Rosalie looked up when I came in the door and said my name, not clearly, not in the way she would say it in a year, but in the approximate way that babies say names before they have the full shape of them, a sound that is reaching for a word the way a root reaches for water in the dark, and I stopped in the doorway and stood there for a moment because I had not expected to be moved and I was moved unexpectedly entirely. She's been saying that all morning, Tanya said. She was watching me with an expression that had something careful in it but also something that was not performed, a kind of tentative warmth, the warmth of someone who is offering something and is not certain it will be accepted. Good morning, I said to Rosalie. She said my name again, the approximate version of it, and reached out her hands in the way that meant she wanted to be held, and I set down my bag and went to her. There are moments in a life that you cannot plan for, and cannot manufacture, and cannot find the adequate word for afterward. Holding Rosalie in my kitchen on a February morning, with Tanya quietly returning to whatever she had been doing and the thin winter light coming through the window over the sink and the smell of baking in the air. This was one of those moments. Not because it was large. Because it was exactly what it was. Because it was February and the wisteria was bare and the roots were working in the dark and something in the house was trying, genuinely trying, to become what it had not yet become. I held the baby. I thought about Patricia. I thought about what she had known or imagined or hoped, when she set the condition 11 years ago. The youngest living child of either of her brothers. She did not know Rosalie was coming. She knew something was. That evening after dinner, I asked Jalen and Tanya to sit with me at the kitchen table. They came with the particular alertness of people who have learned, over the past months, that a request to sit at the kitchen table means something is about to be said that requires sitting. Tanya had Rosalie on her lap. Jalen had his coffee. I had my hands flat on the table in front of me, the way I sit when I am about to say something I have thought through completely and intend to mean. I received a letter last week, I said. From the estate of Gerald's sister Patricia. Jalen straightened slightly. He had not known Patricia well. She died before he was fully adult, before he had the perspective to appreciate the kind of person she was. But he knew her name, knew the name of the estate, knew that it existed. I told them about the letter. The condition Patricia had set. Rosalie's first birthday in July as the trigger. The amount, which I stated plainly and without ceremony, because the plainness is its own form of respect. The kitchen was very quiet. Tanya looked at Rosalie, then at me. There was something on her face I had not seen before. Not the assessor's eye, not the composed diplomat, not the woman who calls attorneys on Tuesdays and apologizes on Saturdays. Something younger than all of that. Something that might have been the real Tanya underneath all the strategy and the management and the careful curation of how she moved through the world. She said quietly, because of Rosalie. Because of the condition Patricia set, I said. But yes. The moment it became relevant was Rosalie's birthday. Jalen said nothing for a moment. He was doing arithmetic in his head the way his father used to do arithmetic, not adding numbers but adding implications, adding what this information means layered on top of everything else that has been said and done and written and reconsidered over the past 3 months. Mom, he said. What does this mean? It means, I said, that I went to see Howard this morning, and that the second document, the one you read at dinner in November, is going to be revised. Tanya went very still. Revised how? Jalen said. I told them. Not every detail. Those are Howard's to present properly, in the formal context where such things belong. But the shape of it, the intention behind it, the thinking that had brought me from November's dinner table to February's kitchen, from the language of protection to something different, something that was trying to be adequate to the actual situation rather than adequate to my anger at it. I told them that the estate, the properties, the accounts, everything Gerald and I had built and everything Patricia had now added to it, was going to be arranged not as a punishment and not as a reward and not as a threat, but as something that tried to be fair to the people who were actually in the room. That Rosalie's interests were going to be protected directly, not contingently. That Jalen's place in the estate was going to be restored to something closer to what it had been before I rewrote it in November, with conditions that were about stewardship rather than about leverage. And that Tanya's name was going to appear in a document that bore my signature. Not because I had forgotten the attorney. Not because I had decided to pretend it had not happened. Because Tanya is Rosalie's mother, and Rosalie is the reason Patricia's trust paid out at all, and there is a logic to the world that sometimes arrives at its own justice without anyone having to engineer it. Tanya looked at me for a long time. I don't understand, she said. After everything, I said, is exactly when it matters what kind of person you decide to be. I could decide to be the kind of person who holds what happened against you permanently. I could decide that the attorney, and the phrase that was used about me, and the months of room negotiations and furniture rearrangements are things I do not forgive. And I could be right to decide that. I would not be wrong. She did not look away. But I would also be the kind of person who lets her granddaughter grow up in a house where the women do not trust each other, I said. And I am not willing to be that person. The kitchen was very quiet. Rosalie reached for the edge of the table and caught it with both hands, gripping it with the full conviction of someone who has found something solid and intends to hold on. We all watched her do it. You cannot help but watch a baby discover grip. It is too much like watching the whole of human history in miniature, the reaching, the finding, the holding. Mrs. Marsh, Tanya said. And for the first time in 3 years of knowing each other, she said it not as a formality but as a form of address. Not mother-in-law, which she had said with the particular condescension of someone who has decided what the words mean. Not Eleanor, which I had not yet given her. Mrs. Marsh. Simple. Accurate. The name of a woman she was acknowledging, finally, as fully present in the room. "What do you need from us?" she said. It was the right question. It was Jalen's question from months ago, "What do you need from me?" But coming from Tanya, it had a different weight because it had cost her more to ask it. I could see that it had cost her. The Tanya who arrived at this house in April with her assessors, I would not have asked it. The Tanya across the table from me now had been changed by what had happened here. The way everyone in this house had been changed, the way a house changes everyone who lives in it long enough to be honest inside it. "What I need from you," I said, "is what I have always needed. To be seen as who I actually am, not as who it is convenient for me to be." She nodded. "I am not a woman who needs managing," I said. "I am not a woman whose possessions are available for rearrangement or whose room assignments are subject to negotiation. I am not diminished and I am not diminishing, and I need that to be the operating assumption from which everything else proceeds." "Yes," she said, plainly, without the diplomatic gloss. "And Rosalie," I said, "is going to know this house. She is going to know me. Not the version of me that gets moved to the front room, but this one. The one who has been here for 40 years and intends to be here 40 more if God is willing." Tanya looked at Rosalie, then back at me. And then she did something I had not expected and could not have predicted. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Not in the way she used to touch me, the practiced warmth, the social gesture. In the way of someone who is reaching because they mean to reach, who has weighed the cost of the gesture and decided it is worth making. I looked at her hand on mine. I turned my hand over and held it briefly. Then I let go, and I poured us all more coffee, and Rosalie banged the table with both palms and laughed at the sound, and I thought, there it is. There is what a house can do when it is finally being used for what a house is for. In the weeks that followed, things shifted. Not all at once, not in the dramatic way of a story that resolves cleanly, because real things do not resolve cleanly, and any story that tells you otherwise is leaving out the part where people are still people, complicated and imperfect and trying. But there was a different quality to the air in the house on Carver Street in February and March, the way there is a different quality to air when winter is deciding to relent. Not spring yet, but not spring either. Tanya stopped rearranging things. This sounds like a small thing, and I want you to understand that it was not a small thing. It was the thing that told me more than any conversation did, because what people stop doing is always more honest than what they start doing. She stopped moving objects. She stopped making decisions about the house that were hers to make, and she started asking, and the asking was different from the asking she had done in the early months, not the asking of a person performing consideration, but the asking of a person who had learned that there was someone in this house who had been here longer than she had and who knew the house in ways she did not yet know it, and who might, if asked correctly, share some of that knowing. I started teaching her to cook. Not because she asked, she did not ask at first, but because I started talking while I cooked, the way I talk when Celeste is in the kitchen with me, the way I talked to my boys when they were small, and the kitchen was the room where everything happened, and Tanya started listening, and listening became presence, and presence became a question, and the question was, how do you know when the sauce is ready? And I told her. And she learned. It is a small thing. It is everything. Jalen, in the months that followed, became someone I had not seen since before Tanya arrived in his life. Not because Tanya had taken him from me, I want to be careful about that, because the truth is more complicated than that simple accusation. He had allowed himself to be taken. He had allowed himself to look away from the things that were happening in front of him because looking at them was uncomfortable, and love sometimes makes looking away feel like kindness. He was not wrong to love her. He was wrong to let the love become a reason not to see. He sees now. He came to me in March with a question I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it. He sat at the table with his coffee and he said, "Mom, tell me about the company. Tell me how it actually works." And I told him. We spent 3 Saturday mornings going through the books. Not because I needed him to take over, I am not going anywhere, and I have made that clear in every form available to me, but because he asked, and asking is how a family actually works, and I had kept too much to myself for too long, believing that I was protecting my independence when what I was actually doing was preventing the inheritance of knowledge that a family needs to survive beyond one generation. Gerald used to say, "Build it to outlast you." I had been building it. I had not been building the people who would carry it. I started building the people. Howard had the revised documents ready in March. I signed them on a Tuesday morning in his office with the smell of paper, and wood around me, and the city going about its business outside the window. He handed me the pen. I signed. He witnessed. We shook hands the way we have shaken hands for 35 years, firmly, with the acknowledgement between us of everything that has been done here and is now done differently. In the car on the way home, I pulled over on Bay Street for a moment. Just sat. The February light was gone and the March light was doing what March light does, which is to try harder than February does, to commit more fully to the business of illuminating things. I thought about Gerald. I thought about what he would say if he could see the house right now. If he could see Rosalie in the high chair and Tanya learning the sauce and Jalen with the ledger open in front of him, asking questions he should have asked years ago. If he could see me in my room in my house with my window and my wisteria and my morning coffee and the full weight of what I have spent my life building and what I have decided to do with it. He would say, Eleanor, you always did think 12 steps ahead. He would say it the way Howard says it, with the smile that happens on the inside. I thought he would also say something else, something he used to say in the last years of his life when he was tired but not unhappy, when he was looking at the house and the life and the accumulated result of everything we had done together. He used to sit on the back porch in the evening and look at the wisteria and say, in the tone of someone who has been surprised by something he thought he already understood, look at what we made. Look at what we made. I drove home. Spring came to Carver Street the way it always comes, without asking permission, without announcement, simply arriving one morning and being unmistakably itself. The wisteria came back the way it has come back every year since Gerald planted it, the same impossible purple, the same smell that is not quite any other smell, the particular extravagance of it against the fence. Rosalie saw it for the first time with full awareness. She had been in the house last spring but she had been too new to understand what spring was, and now she was 8 months past her first birthday and she understood something, maybe not spring exactly but the principle of it, the way that bare things become full and full things overflow. I held her at the back window and she pressed both hands against the glass and said something that was not quite a word but was reaching for one, and I said, that's wisteria. Your grandfather planted it. She said a sound that was reaching for grandfather. I held her tighter. Tanya was in the kitchen behind us. She did not say anything, but I heard her set down whatever she was holding, and I knew she had heard and I did not turn around. Some things are better witnessed quietly. The house on Carver Street is mine. It will be, in time, theirs. That is the nature of things, not loss but continuation, which is the only kind of permanence that is actually available to us. I have made my arrangements, Gerald's arrangements, Patricia's arrangements, and all of them together say, this is what we were building, all of us across all these years, and here it is. Here is what it is. A baby at a window. A woman in a kitchen learning a recipe. A man with a ledger full of questions he is finally asking. And me. In my room. In my house. With my window and my wisteria and my coffee at 4:30 in the morning and the dark blue sky doing what dark blue skies do, which is to hold still until they are ready to become something else. I am 67 years old. I have buried a husband and raised 2 sons and built a company on a foundation of doing work that other people did not see and making decisions that other people did not know about until the moment they needed to know. I have kept my own counsel and managed my own affairs and pressed things firmly until they held, the way my mother pressed church clothes, the way you do when you have decided that something matters and you intend for it to last. I have also, in the last year, learned something about the difference between building walls and building tables. Walls keep things out. Tables invite things in. Both are necessary. But there is a particular failure mode of women like me, women who have been hurt enough times that they have become extremely good at building walls, which is that the walls eventually keep out the things you actually wanted to let in, if you had been willing to risk it. Rosalie was what I was willing to risk it for. You may be in a house right now where someone has put you in the smaller room. Not literally, or maybe literally, maybe the smaller room is exactly what I mean. I am talking to you from the place of a woman who has been there, who has felt the creeping reduction of it, who has watched herself being rearranged the way furniture gets rearranged by someone who has decided they know better how the space should work. Here is what I want you to know. The space is yours. The space has always been yours. It is yours because you built it, or because you kept it, or because you showed up in it every single morning for 40 years and made it what it is. And no one, not a daughter-in-law with an assessor's eye, not a son who let himself look away, not anyone, has the authority to reduce you in it without your consent. Do not give your consent. Not because you are angry. Not to punish anyone. But because being small in your own house teaches everyone around you that smallness is acceptable, and the people you love most, the grandchildren, the sons, the people who are still figuring out what kind of people they are going to be, will learn from watching you. They will learn either that women like you can be rearranged when it becomes convenient, or that women like you are exactly as large as you have always been and intend to remain. Let them learn the second one. Let them learn it the way Rosalie will learn it, by watching you stand at your own window in your own house with your hands around your own coffee cup, looking at your own wisteria in the morning light, knowing exactly who you are and where you are and what you have built and what it means. You do not have to pack a bag. You do not have to leave. You just have to pick up the phone. One phone call. One person who has known you long enough to understand what you are asking before you finish asking it. One conversation in an office that smells like paper and wood and serious decisions where you say, here is what I have, here is what I need, here is what I am not willing to be. And then you go home. And you stay. I am still here. I am in my room, the room with the east and south windows and Gerald's wisteria and 31 years in the walls. I am still at my desk with my ledger. I am still in the kitchen at dinner and at the table on Sunday mornings and at the window at 4:30 when the sky is that particular dark blue and the house is breathing around me and everything that matters is still exactly where it belongs. Rosalie is starting to walk. She does it the way babies do everything, with more commitment than skill, with an absolute conviction that forward is the right direction and that the falling is just part of it, not the end of anything. She comes to me when she falls. She puts her arms up and says the approximate version of my name and I pick her up and she grabs my collar and holds on and we stand at the window together and look at the wisteria. Your grandfather planted that, I tell her. She says a sound that is reaching for grandfather. And we look at it together, the bare branches and the full branches depending on the season, and I think about roots and about what they do in winter and about the word continue, which is not the same as the word survive, which is not the same as the word thrive, but which contains all of them the way the root contains the branch contains the flower contains the smell of spring that is not quite any other smell. We are continuing. All of us. In the house on Carver Street, in the room with the east and south windows, in the kitchen where I am teaching someone to cook and the study where a man is learning the books and the hallway where a baby is walking with more conviction than skill, we are continuing. Which is what houses are for. Which is what all of this has always been for. Megaphone, thank you for staying all the way to the end. The people who finish the whole story are the ones who understand it, and the ones who share it. If this one moved you, the next video on your screen is waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come back. There's always another woman the world underestimated. And we tell those stories here.